All right, so this has been super interesting. It really seems like what they're doing here is setting it up so that everyone agrees that what happened on that day was an insurrection. So some folks have been found guilty of seditious conspiracy, which is a different charge than an insurrection. And it's harder to prove that an insurrection took place. Obviously, it's never happened before. And the difference is you have to prove a significant amount of violence. And they're really demonstrating that, talking about hand-to-hand combat, talking about the people who got shot, showing these videos again, reiterating the testimony we heard from Cassidy Hutchinson. They're doing a really good job putting this in the timeline of precisely what happened. And while all of this is going on, listen, we know that this isn't a criminal court, it's the court of public opinion, but it's really important that the American people know that if and when Trump is convicted of a crime, which we hope he will be in Fulton County, Rudy Giuliani is trying to get out of testifying in that case right now in front of the grand jury, but he failed to show up to his appointment where he was trying to get out of that subpoena. Now he's gonna actually have to go testify. But they're doing a really good job laying out everything that happened and making it very clear that what happened on that day was an insurrection by the legal definition of the word.
Yeah, so I think this part of the hearings are very important. And there's a reason why they saved them to prime time this time. And what they're doing is proving culpability during the violence. So for 3 hours and 7 minutes between his speech and when he finally called for the rioters to go home, President Trump was fully aware, and that is the important part here. And that's why I actually think these January 6 hearings have been shockingly good. They have proved their case oftentimes, and they've presented evidence that we didn't know before, and they have made it very, very hard for Republicans to refute what they're saying. Now, of course, most of the Republicans aren't watching. If they are watching, they live on a different planet. But we're talking about Republican Party officials and other influential members of the Republican Party as they sit there and today watch testimony about how the vice president was going to be murdered, and the president knew that the vice president's life was in danger, and he purposely didn't do anything. You really have to be an extra special kind of monster to say, yeah, no, I'm in for that. I'm in for murdering the vice president if he doesn't destroy democracy. That is full fascist. That is full dictator. That is a full coup attempt. And so the devastating parts were when it is clearly established that the president and everyone in the White House knew the Capitol had been breached. There was violence and there was calls to attack Mike Pence physically. And Trump sent out a tweet at 2:24 encouraging that, saying that Mike Pence had betrayed them. And then you see the hang Mike Pence chants. You see the protesters 2 minutes later violently attacking the police. More protesters getting past the barricades and into the building. And their number one target was the Republican vice president of the United States. And a devastating part of the testimony was when we found out that the Secret Service members were telling others on the other end of the radio, tell my family goodbye. They thought that the rioters were going to kill them. And still, not only did Trump do nothing to protect the Secret Service, the members of Congress, including fellow Republicans, but most importantly, his own vice president. It was amazing. And so I always wondered, and I wanted to ask the question of who actually called the National Guard? Because it was fairly clear that Trump never called in the National Guard. He never called in any security. And that is what they're proving here tonight. They're showing very clearly he sat watching TV, calling senators to pressure them that they better not do the wrong thing as their lives were in danger. And he did nothing but add fuel to the fire, as the witnesses said. And they established right in the beginning, Jessica, that all the people testifying are deeply Republican. Pottinger talked about how he, Trump did such a great job with his dealings with China and Israel and all of these things, all things that we massively disagree with. The other witness helped him to get, or was trying to help him to get elected, was with him all the time. And what I also found amazing, Jessica, is that they were genuinely shocked, Trump advisors, that he did not mind the violence, that he did not mind that the vice president's life was in danger. I wouldn't be shocked at all. That's the Donald Trump I know. But they were true believers. And in that moment, when they realized who he is, they couldn't believe it.
Right, if they can turn, or if he can turn, Donald Trump can turn on Mike Pence that quickly, they all knew that Donald Trump would also turn on them if it came down to it. If they were in the line of fire, Trump would turn on them just as fast. And so I think that's a part of the reason why they all feel so comfortable testifying today, is because Trump has no loyalty to anyone but himself. And now he has to face the facts of everyone in his cabinet, Republicans now testifying against him. And there are a few people who are still backing Trump. And now we have Bannon in his criminal case. He's not even testifying in his own case, which is something we heard today. It's just insane. And I think the point about the president not calling the National Guard, because under the definition of insurrection, there's also a clause where they say that it's the president's duty to use military force if necessary and to direct insurgents to disperse and go home. And it's clear today that he did not do that. And we know that when he was traveling from where he gave the speech back to the White House, that whole ordeal in the vehicle, after we heard about that in the last hearings, the Republicans ate that up. They said, they were in the Beast. There's glass separating the backseat and the front seat. They were not in the Beast. They really wanted to make people not believe that this is what happened. So it's good that they called on Sergeant Robinson today to corroborate that story and what happened between the Secret Service. And absolutely insane that members of the Secret Service were calling their families to say goodbye. They were really worried about what would go down that day. And we know that Trump was so adamant about going to meet with the crowd, even though he knew that there's a significant risk of violence, didn't care that the violence would be directed towards maybe a Secret Service agents, Mike Pence, anyone in his cabinet, because he knew that they wouldn't hurt him. And so this is very clearly an insurrection by the definition of the word. And they're doing a really good job, not only adjusting what they're showing in prime time to respond to what some Republicans are saying, whether intentionally or not, but make it very clear that this is indisputable. And I just want to read a little bit of this statement that Trump posted on Truth Social, because it's very clear from what we're seeing that he was totally fine with violence against Mike Pence. And actually, I'm taking this statement as a little bit of backtracking. So he said, Mike Pence told me and everybody else that there was nothing he could do about the electoral vote count. It was etched in stone. But if so, how come the Democrats and rhinos are working so hard to make sure there's nothing a VP can do? This was a major event because everybody ganged up and said that Mike had no choice. He could not send the slates back to the states, which is all I suggested he do, for possible retabulation and correction based on large scale voter fraud and irregularities. That's huge backtracking right there. That's just a misrepresentation of what happened.
Of course, it's a misrepresentation of what happened. But the main thing I take away, two things I take away from that. One, he's saying that in the middle of these hearings, we're finding out that they were going to kill the vice president, and Trump didn't do anything about that. And he puts out a statement attacking Pence anyway in the middle of the hearings. That's amazing. But number two is, he still thinks that Pence could have single-handedly overturned the entire election, that all of your votes didn't mean a goddamn thing. Who cares how you voted? The vice president can unilaterally end our democracy. That's the ravings of a lunatic mind. Does he do? I mean, right-wingers, do you guys understand anything about how democracy works? If your theory and Trump's theory was correct, then Kamala Harris could decide that Joe Biden is president, no matter how you voted. Do you want that? Do you think that is the correct theory? You'd have to be crazy to think that's correct. No Democrat in their right mind would ever say that Kamala Harris could unilaterally decide to put in fake electors and make sure that Joe Biden continues as president when he had actually lost the vote. They lost 60 cases in a row. They should emphasize that 1,000 times over. But back to the violence here. So one of the things that they kept asking people in his national security team is it the obligation of the president to protect the nation's capital? To which their answer was, roughly speaking, of course, that's a core job of the president, is to protect the Capitol. And every advisor is coming in going, sir, the Capitol's been breached. We are under attack. Basically, they're telling the president of America, America is under attack. And he's going, and he liked it. And it wasn't just, hey, he didn't know, or they didn't get him the proper information. No, what they've established here tonight is he definitely knew, and he chose not to act because he liked the violence and he thought the violence might get him what he wanted. The advisors eventually even bring in the Trump whisperer, the only person they think that he might listen to. There's a prayer that he might listen to, and that's Ivanka Trump. So they're like, Ivanka, please tell him to call off the dogs. They're about to murder the vice president. So Ivanka tries, and he's like, nope, nope. And as you heard from testimony in earlier hearings, he thought Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, said he thinks Mike Pence deserves it. If you still, after knowing that, say, yes, I like Donald Trump. I like that he tried to get his own vice president killed. Well, there's something deeply wrong with you. And unfortunately, that's a giant chunk of the country. So last couple of things here. I like how they threw some fun dirt at other Republicans that on that day that were scared for their lives. But then now are acting like, oh, what's the big deal? Oh, yeah, sure. It was, oh, yeah, they were just tourists. They were Antifa. They were just good patriotic Americans. Liz Cheney said Kevin McCarthy was scared. Okay, and then they showed a clip of Kevin McCarthy being scared. Then they showed Josh Hawley acting like a tough guy in front of the rioters, like egging them on with a fist in the air. And then they showed Josh Hawley running like, later, when he realizes his ass is in danger, right? And they did that several times, and I thought that it was to good effect. And so yet another case here. Oh, and one more thing about the violence. Remember, in earlier hearings, we saw that it was not in his script to say go to the Capitol. Donald Trump improvised that and egged his supporters to go and attack the Capitol. Then when he saw that they were attacking the Capitol, he loved it. And not only did he not do anything, he put out the 224 tweet encouraging them to target Mike Pence. It is devastating. Anyone who still says they're a Trump fan are basically saying, yeah, I like a guy who wants to be dictator and murder his political opponents. It's insanity. And it's certainly not America.